660 cubic centimeters. That's 40 cubic inches, smaller than a vintage Harley-Davidson motorcycle engine. Yet somehow, Japanese engineers managed to extract 64 horsepower from this microscopic displacement, add a turbocharger, and create some of the most entertaining performance cars ever built. This is the story of Suzuki's tiny turbo Kei engines, power plants so small you could almost carry them in your arms, yet so clever they redefined what automotive engineering could achieve within the strictest regulations imaginable.
To understand why Suzuki built engines this small, we need to understand the Kei car category itself. After World War II, Japan's economy was in ruins. The government needed to get people moving affordably, so in 1949 they created the Kei car category, Kei being short for Keiji Dosha, which translates to light automobile. The regulations were strict. A maximum vehicle length of 3.4 meters, width of 1.48 meters, height under 2 meters, and engine displacement under 660 cubic centimeters. These regulations weren't arbitrary. They were designed to make car ownership accessible to the masses while conserving resources in a recovering nation. But here's where it gets interesting. The Japanese government offered massive incentives for Kei car ownership, significantly reduced taxes, cheaper insurance rates, and even exemption from the costly parking space certification required for regular vehicles in crowded Japanese cities. This created a massive market, and where there's a market, there's competition. Initially, Kei cars were basic transportation, simple three-wheeled affairs with two-stroke engines barely powerful enough to climb hills. But as Japan's economy boomed through the 1970s and 80s, manufacturers realized they could sell performance within these tiny regulations. And nobody did it better than Suzuki.
Suzuki's journey into turbocharged Kei performance began with the F-Series engines. These were inline, three-cylinder units with a cast-iron block design that prioritized durability. The F5A came first, but the F6A that followed from 1990 to 2001 would become legendary. The F6A was a masterpiece of packaging. With its 657 cubic centimeter displacement, squeezed from a bore of 66 millimeters and stroke of 64 millimeters, it sat just under the legal limit. The F6A featured a sleeveless, compact structure with a high-rigidity cast-iron block topped with an aluminum alloy cylinder head featuring a 4-valve single overhead cam design. But Suzuki didn't stop at naturally aspirated versions. They knew that to make these tiny engines fun, they needed forced induction. Enter the turbocharged F6A. The F6A Turbo produced 43 kilowatts initially, then 45.5 kilowatts, and eventually 47 kilowatts by 1995, with torque figures ranging from 86 to 98 newton-meters. Now, those power figures might sound modest, but remember the context. We're talking about an engine smaller than most motorcycle power plants. The turbocharged F6A achieved something remarkable. It reached the voluntary 64 horsepower limit that Japanese manufacturers agreed upon for Kei cars, though many suspected the actual output was higher. The genius of the F6A wasn't just in its power output. It was in how Suzuki achieved that power. The turbocharger was carefully sized to provide boost without overwhelming the tiny displacement. The cooling system was engineered to handle the additional heat. The oiling system had to maintain pressure at high RPMs while fitting in an incredibly compact package. The F6A is widely considered the high point in Suzuki engine design, and the car was a sensation in the Kei car aftermarket. Tuners loved it because despite its small size, the cast-iron block could handle boost increases. With proper modifications, the F6A could see RPMs approaching 12,000, a testament to its robust internal design.
The perfect showcase for the F6A Turbo was the Suzuki Alto Works. Performance versions of the Alto first appeared in September 1985, when a fuel-injected and turbocharged engine with 44 horsepower was made available. But it was the later Alto Works models that truly captured enthusiasts' hearts. Picture this, a tiny hatchback weighing barely 700 kilograms, powered by a turbocharged three-cylinder engine making 64 horsepower. The power-to-weight ratio was phenomenal. The Alto Works produced 64 horsepower officially, the legal limit for Kei-class cars, though rumors suggested it had more. It drove the front wheels through a 5-speed manual gearbox, and all-wheel drive versions were also available. The Alto Works wasn't just about straight-line speed. Suzuki understood that with limited power, they needed to focus on weight reduction and handling. The suspension was tuned for responsiveness, the steering was direct, and the overall package encouraged spirited driving. This was a car that rewarded skill over raw power, teaching drivers to maintain momentum through corners rather than relying on brutal acceleration. The turbo characteristics of the F6A turbo were unique. Unlike modern turbocharged engines with virtually no lag, the F6A turbo had a noticeable spool time. But enthusiasts loved this. The moment when the turbo kicked in, suddenly flooding that tiny engine with boost became an addictive part of the driving experience. It taught throttle control and timing, skills that transferred to larger performance cars. By 1994, Suzuki introduced the K6A engine, a 0.6-liter, three-cylinder unit produced until 2018 and installed in almost all compact models, including the Alto, Wagon R, and Jimny. The K6A represented the next evolution in Suzuki's Kei engine technology. Where the F6A relied on cast iron for strength, the K6A took a different approach. All Kei engines featured aluminum cylinder blocks with 3 or 4 cylinders in line, and cylinder heads with 2 overhead camshafts driven by chain and 4 valves per cylinder. This was a significant technological leap. Moving to an all-aluminum construction meant weight savings, critical in a category where every kilogram mattered. But there was a trade-off. While the aluminum block was very light, tuners found it weaker than the F6A when it came to taking massive boost and RPM. The cast-iron F6A could handle more abuse in extreme tuning scenarios. However, the K6A brought modern features the F6A lacked. The K6A was the first Kei engine with variable valve timing, allowing for better efficiency at low RPMs while maintaining performance at high RPMs. This made the K6A more refined for daily driving, with better fuel economy and smoother power delivery. In turbocharged form, the K6A produced 64 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 106 Newton-meters of torque at 3,500 RPM, with a bore and stroke of 68.0 millimeters by 60.4 millimeters. The engine achieved the same legal power limit as its predecessor, but with better emissions, fuel economy, and drivability. The K6A powered various models, but one stands out: the Suzuki Kei. Produced between 1998 and 2009, the Suzuki Kei was initially available as a 3-door hatchback before a 5-door version arrived. The sporty Kei Works variant featured a turbocharged 658cc inline 3, producing 63 horsepower and 78.1 pound-feet of torque with bucket seats developed in collaboration with Recaro. If the Alto Works proved Kei engines could be fun in a hatchback, the Suzuki Cappuccino proved they could power a genuine sports car. Production of the Cappuccino began in 1991 and ceased in 1998, with its closest competitors being the AutoZam AZ1 and Honda Beat, together referred to as the sporty Kei car ABC. Weighing just 725 kilograms, the Cappuccino was powered by a turbocharged 3-cylinder 657cc DOHC engine. But here's what made it special. This wasn't just a Kei engine in a small body. This was a properly engineered rear-wheel drive roadster with a removable targa top that could be configured 3 different ways. The Cappuccino's F6A turbo engine was mounted longitudinally behind the front axle for better weight distribution. It was the first Kei car to employ 4-wheel independent double wishbone suspension with extensive use of aluminum. This was suspension technology you'd find on far more expensive sports cars. Think about what Suzuki achieved here.
They took an engine designed for economy hatchbacks and turned it into the power plant for a legitimate sports car. The Cappuccino could rev eagerly. The turbo provided a surge of power in the mid-range, and the chassis was responsive enough to exploit every bit of that 64 horsepower. The Cappuccino became a cult classic, especially outside Japan where it was never officially sold. Even 25 years later, Cappuccinos can still be seen at track days and time attacks. Its reputation as the mini Miata was well earned, offering similar driving joy in an even smaller package.
Creating these tiny turbo engines wasn't just about making something small. It was about solving engineering challenges that don't exist at larger displacements. Heat management was critical. Turbochargers generate significant heat, and in an engine this small, there's less thermal mass to absorb it. Suzuki had to engineer cooling systems that could keep temperatures in check without adding excessive weight or complexity. Lubrication presented another challenge. At high RPMs, the three-cylinder configuration can create imbalances, and the oil system needed to maintain pressure to all bearings despite the compact packaging. The oil passages had to be carefully designed to ensure adequate flow without taking up too much space. Turbo sizing was perhaps the most delicate balance. Too small a turbo wouldn't provide meaningful boost. Too large, and you'd have unbearable lag that would make the engine frustrating to use. Suzuki settled on small, quick-spooling turbochargers that matched the engine's character, providing boosts that felt responsive rather than overwhelming. The intake and exhaust systems also required careful engineering. With such small displacement, every restriction mattered. The intake had to flow efficiently while accommodating the turbocharger, intercooler, and all necessary plumbing. The exhaust needed to evacuate gases quickly without creating excessive back pressure. Emissions regulations added another layer of complexity. These engines had to meet increasingly strict standards while maintaining performance. The K6A's variable valve timing helped address this, allowing the engine to run efficiently at cruise while still delivering power when needed. The tuning community embraced Suzuki's Kei engines, particularly the F6A. The cast iron block construction meant it could handle significant boost increases with the right supporting modifications. Upgraded turbochargers, aftermarket engine management, and strengthened internals could push these engines well beyond their factory ratings. Some tuners achieved outputs exceeding 100 horsepower from the 660cc displacement, nearly doubling the factory figure. But this wasn't just about peak power. The challenge was making that power usable in such a lightweight chassis without compromising reliability. The F6A developed a reputation for being bulletproof when properly maintained. The robust bottom end could handle abuse, and the simple overhead cam design made it easy to work on. Parts availability was excellent in Japan, and a thriving aftermarket provided everything from camshafts to complete engine rebuild kits. Track enthusiasts discovered that in lighter chassis, these engines were competitive. At circuits where momentum mattered more than power, a well-driven Alto Works or Cappuccino could embarrass much more powerful cars. The combination of lightweight, responsive handling, and just enough power to maintain momentum made them giant killers. Modern Alto Works models use Suzuki's latest three-cylinder turbocharged R07A engine, making 63 horsepower and 100 Newton-meters. While the formula remains similar, modern emissions and safety regulations have added weight to these cars. The legacy of Suzuki's tiny turbo engines extends beyond just performance figures. They demonstrated that engineering excellence isn't about displacement or cylinder count. It's about working within constraints to create something greater than the sum of its parts. These engines influenced an entire generation of automotive enthusiasts, particularly outside Japan, where Kei cars were exotic curiosities. They showed that fun didn't require hundreds of horsepower or massive displacement. Lightweight, responsive handling, combined with just enough power, created an engaging driving experience that modern performance cars sometimes struggle to replicate. The principles Suzuki learned developing these engines carried over to their other products. The engineering expertise in turbocharging small displacement engines informed their motorcycle development. The focus on weight reduction and efficiency influenced their entire vehicle lineup. Today, as the automotive industry moves toward downsizing and forced induction across all segments, Suzuki's Kei engines seem prescient. Modern 1.0-liter three-cylinder turbocharged engines in mainstream cars employ many of the same principles Suzuki pioneered decades ago in their 660cc power plants.
Suzuki's tiny turbo Kei engines represent some of the most impressive feats of automotive engineering. To extract 64 horsepower from just 660 cubic centimeters of displacement, make it reliable enough for daily use, efficient enough to meet emission standards, and fun enough to power genuine sports cars required expertise that bordered on genius. The F6A and K6A engines proved that creativity thrives within constraints. Japanese engineers didn't see the Kei car regulations as limitations, but as challenges to overcome. They created power plants that delivered joy in the purest form, lightweight cars with responsive engines that rewarded driver skill over raw power. These engines powered some of the most entertaining vehicles ever created. The Alto Works taught a generation about momentum driving and boost control. The Cappuccino proved a sports car didn't need a big engine to be special. The entire Kei performance category showed that fun came in small packages. As the automotive world continues evolving with electric vehicles and ever stricter regulations reshaping what cars can be, Suzuki's tiny turbo Kei engines remind us of a fundamental truth. Great engineering isn't about having unlimited resources or complete freedom. It's about taking strict constraints and turning them into advantages. It's about making every cubic centimeter count. These 660cc marvels may be small, but their impact on automotive culture is anything but. They stand as testament to the ingenuity of Japanese engineering and the enduring appeal of simple, lightweight performance. In a world obsessed with more power, more cylinders, and more displacement, Suzuki's tiny turbo Kei engines whisper a different truth. Sometimes, less really is more.